Hi, friends. It's podcast day. It's podcast day. Welcome in. Welcome to the heyBrownBerry YouTube channel. My name is Marceline, and I am very pleased to have you here. I am just recording today because I have been very much out of practice of sitting in front of the camera, and I get in my head a bit about whether or not I have things to share. I always have things to share. This channel is primarily about my making journey, knitting, spinning. I have talked about crochet, natural dyeing, all sorts of making goodness. And those are not instant gratification type projects that I share. So often I'm working on the same thing for weeks, even months at times. And so I get in my head a bit about whether or not I want to keep sharing about the same projects over and over. But then I remember that if you came to this channel interested in a making journey, you're probably experiencing the same thing. So if nothing else, you can relate. You know, it's interesting to me that there's a parallel between the work and time that it takes to put out a podcast episode and the work and time that it takes to create handmade items, garments, things for your home, whatever it is you're making. I'm realizing in this moment as I'm talking to you that generally what pushes me forward is wanting the end result. So it's not always easy to go through the steps of creating an episode to upload to YouTube, but every time I do, those of you who come and watch and like the video and comment and carry on a conversation in the comments with me make it worth it. And it's not always easy to see the benefit and the goodness in that end goal while you're in the midst of the doing and the work. And what you're getting now is just my unfiltered reflection about how hard that is sometimes. Kind of led into that because of thinking about the projects I was going to show you that I have stalled on a little bit, or crawling on them, let's say. I've talked a bit about how I would like for all of us to normalize long-term making. So by that, I mean, make it obvious to others that the things that we are into just take a long time, many hours, spread over long periods of time. And even though on social media we get to see a lot of people's finishes, we don't often get to see all of the steps that lead up to that. And I would love for it to just be more normal to show how long things take. And in fact, on this channel, it's my hope that I continue to really embody that, embrace that, and that you'll enjoy that along with me, and that, you know, we journey through some of these together. You can always feel free to tell me about what you're working on, even if it's the same project and you just want someone out there in the internet universe to know that you're making progress and that you're inching your way towards the finish. Yeah, I'm often motivated by wanting the thing, but sometimes I get demotivated in the process of creating the thing. Maybe you can relate. One of the things I've been working on for a very long time is this patchwork quilt. I have really enjoyed the process of creating all of the little sections of patchwork. So some of these pieces of fabric were put together with instructions, so intentional blocks. I'll give you an example of one of those. where I followed a pattern and I knew, the shapes and sizes to cut and how to assemble them. And then other patches in here were just sewing time for me, sewing playtime, just putting together different pieces of scrap fabric from my stash and combining them any which way, like this. I really, really enjoy this. In fact, I'm much more comfortable with this kind of random, haphazard assembly when it's in fabric form than when it is in yarn form. So I'm finding that I'm no longer crazy about the scrappy look for, say, a blanket or even socks when it comes to yarn, where you're just kind of using what you have. I love that principle, use up what you have, but the outcome that's more random and different colors and tones together, I like that much better in a fabric form than in yarn form. So I have enjoyed the process of putting a lot of the pieces together for this quilt top, and it's huge now. It's about 57 inches by 62 inches, something like that, based on my last measurements. I'm having a hard time getting from this point of a huge quilt top to the finish point of a quilt that has batting in it, a border, a backing, the finish. And a lot of things have challenged me with this. I have watched videos on how to assemble quilts. I have seen beautiful finished quilt projects that are really inspiring. And I have taken away some of the pressure of having to do, beautiful planned blocks by also interspersing some patchwork. But the assembly has me stalled. And I'm kind of processing this in the moment as to why that is. The scale that I'm working on is quite large, so almost 5 feet around now, or 5 feet plus on each side. When it's done, it'll probably be more than that. It'll probably be 6 feet plus to be something that will be nice to lay under. And it's very physical to get in there and kind of assemble rows and columns on the quilt top as it gets larger. And now I've watched enough tutorials to know that there's going to come a point at which I need to sandwich the batting in between the quilt top and a backing. And in order to do that well, I want to have things kind of squared off. Man, it's been tough. I had fun just throwing pieces of scrap fabric together, but then two things are really hard for me in making it a nice, neat set of lined edges that will ultimately make this quilt. One is that a lot of the patchwork that I've been doing has not been done with the intent of making a beautiful square. It's been done in small pieces of fabric that just, whatever direction they happen to be in, I get them together. Here's an example of that. So I'm not laying beautiful squares and rectangles right next to each other and just creating, a 9x9 block or something. I'm just playing with the fabric and lining them up with each other in ways that feel pleasing to me. But the thing about doing that at scale is at some point you do have to create some angles, some perpendicular lines, some perpendicular setup that allows you to kind of square off the whole thing. And I've been working on that the last couple weekends, and it's tough. I don't like the waste that happens when I need to cut something down to square off the edges. That's hard for me. I know, I'm working with scraps, it's fabric. At some point it's going to biodegrade. A lot of it is just cotton. But it's hard for me. It's hard for me to cut away a whole section of something in order to get it to line up. And then once I did get to the point of squaring off most of this quilt, I'm working on a very small, simple, cheap sewing machine. It was probably $100 10 years ago. And the bulk of this, just the top, when I've gotten to longer columns of assembly, has been a lot. So imagining doing that with quilt batting and a backing and getting that all through there is really intimidating me. That's what it comes down to. I'm intimidated by the heft of this project. I know that there are other ways to do this. I know that you can quilt as you go and just make it easier to put blocks together. But I think when you're making a quilt of a certain size like this, there's just a part that's going to be physically taxing, mentally taxing, big and bulky. And I'm trying to inch my way through that. What that looks like in the last couple weekends is making a sewing project out of creating a strip or a column to add to the quilt. So just the assembly of a line that will then get attached to the larger piece. And so attaching it to the larger piece is the hardest part because it's the most bulk, but I get to enjoy the smaller, condensed step of just creating a strip that's going to go on the quilt. I did that last weekend. Let's see if I can find where I worked on that. So this edge is last weekend's work of just creating a line that was long enough to go the length of the quilt. And then the rest of the work was squaring off the quilt edge that I was going to add it to. I made it. I think I need to add, for about a full-size quilt, I'm going, 80 plus inches in length and width. And so that for me means I need to add more than 20 inches to this fabric. And the goal here is to make a blanket that both Drew and I could use on the bed, or that you could really kind of bundle up in. Say if you're on the couch, it would cover everything for an afternoon nap. And it's pretty much there. So some of that 20 inches, I think, should probably be my border. I should account for that in there. So maybe I have about 10 to 15 inches of actual patchwork top to go. Thanks for listening to me talk through that. I don't know. It's not something that I've done a lot of, and so therefore I find some parts of it intimidating. Once I get the top done and have it layered onto the batting and the back, I'm really looking forward to the quilting part of it. I've talked on this podcast before about how much I love the squish of quilted fabric, and I'm planning to hand quilt it. Because I don't have perfect rows and columns to follow, I will most likely just pick a simple hand quilting method, maybe even a grid that just goes across the whole thing. Quilting in the ditch is great if you have all matching seams everywhere, but for me, I've got a lot of things going on, so I may just do a straight series of hand quilted lines vertically and then do the same thing horizontally. I've got a nice cotton batting that I got from Crafty Gemini shop. I'll try to remember to link the Crafty Gemini's website down below. She's got tons of supplies for all kinds of crafts. I've shopped with her a couple of times, and I got some great cotton batting, 100% cotton batting from her, which is good for our climate here in South Florida. Wish me luck, friends. I really want to make some progress on this. The motivation is I very, very much want to be laying under this quilt. I want to be napping under it. I want to lay on it outside in the yard. I want to use it. I want the finished thing. And that's pushing me through some of my self-doubt. I often enjoy podcasts where the host of the episode or the folks in the episode are just talking about what's going on in their lives. And it feels like a way to get to know more about the maker. We are all so multi-layered. There's so many things that make up who we are, and there's lots of stuff that happens outside of the time when we turn on the camera. So a life thing I thought about that I could share is that my hubby and I are thinking about moving from our home in Florida within a couple of years. And I've mentioned on the podcast before that we have thoughts about where we'd like to live. And, the reason we want to leave here is that we're thinking more as we become parents of older children about how we, the two of us, want to spend our days and what we'd like to enjoy in daily activity. And most recently, that conversation about where we want to go has gotten a bit more, how would I describe it, focused. We are both really set on the idea of living somewhere else, and we're even set on the idea of maybe living in a few more places before we leave this planet. And the focus that we've taken on is narrowing down our criteria for where we want to live. So some of that criteria is very practical and measurable, like the cost of living and the demographic makeup of the area. How diverse is the community and the population? Safety and proximity to things. I work in technology, and so it's good for me to be within a reasonable distance to an airport so I can travel if I need to for work, but for the most part, I'll be working from a home office. But we still want to have the ability to, get to places that maybe are more developed, more urban, that would have, an airport somewhere that is easily accessible at the same time. So those are the practical things. Those are the things that are just, they make sense for us in where we want to live. And then some of those things are a bit intangible. So, quality of life is a phrase that gets thrown around, and we're trying to define what that means for us. One of the themes that continues to come up is we want the ability to be outside as much as possible. We both love to walk, to hike. I love being near the water. We enjoy the outdoors. And we want to be able to do that. So for us, that might mean not living in one place for an entire year as a way to enjoy a certain kind of weather and access to outdoor things for the majority of the year, because we feel like that's how we'd like to spend our next several years, is really being in nature as much as possible. And other kind of intangible, subjective things like feeling like we have the ability to check out different places. So there are parts of the US where it's really easy to get in your car, and within 2 to 5 hours drive, you can be in a very different environment. As an example, on the West Coast, in places like California, Washington State, Oregon, going up north on the West Coast of the US, within 5 to 6 hours, you could be in mountains, by the ocean, in the desert, and just all of these different types of landscapes, if you're willing to do a bit of a road trip, and we really like that. Thinking about these things has also made us really appreciate the things about our current living situation that we now feel are must-haves. We have a good amount of space here where we live, so we're not right next to our neighbor. We're so grateful for that. But we love our neighbors. We have good neighbors. Most are our neighbors. We have, good relationship with folks who are close enough but not right on top of us. And so having space, having a yard, having access to trails and things like that's something we appreciate about living here. Being able to plant things, put some stuff in the ground, that's becoming more and more of a joy. And so we want to carry over the stuff that we love from here, obviously, into another place. We've narrowed down to some northeastern states in the U.S., some west coast states in the U.S., and we think about places where we have friends already that live in gorgeous, lovely, wonderful neighborhoods and can tell us about that area. So that's a plus. If you know somebody who lives somewhere you're considering living, that's great that you have friends that can recommend or steer you away from certain things. So yeah, that's something we're considering. If you've ever done a move, you probably can appreciate all that takes. And one of the things that I've been working on as part of that is a very, very slow paring down and downsizing. Every weekend, I am really pushing myself to look around at what I have in the house that I already know I would not want to pack this into a moving box and take it to wherever the next space is. And it's helping me to assess the stuff that is nearest and dearest to me. And I'm looking at everything: clothes, making supplies, things that we had for our kids when we homeschooled them, and what someone else can use, I'm boxing up and giving to organizations that take those things. What can't be used anymore and should not be moved on is being thrown away, and I want to do that incrementally. Like I said, we're probably not going to move for the next couple of years or so. And I really feel like it's possible that I could incrementally pare down our stuff in preparation for that in that time. And it takes remembering every weekend that I want to do that. And it takes focus. And it even has taken some hard moments of like facing my stuff and saying, why do I still have this? Or could someone else be using this? Instead of it sitting here collecting dust, quite literally. Or am I still into this? A lot of the things that we have, we collect, we bring into our lives because we're excited about it for whatever reason at that time. And so facing something and asking the question, am I still into this thing? Do I still want to pursue this? Do I need to collect more of this? Or is it time to say goodbye to it? I am finding a lot of comfort in doing that in small chunks, once or twice on a weekend. I still remember when we moved to this house from our old house, I was fully 9 months pregnant with our oldest. It was so difficult. Moving is going to be hard no matter what, but to do it with low energy and all the stuff that, two people can accumulate in a lifetime of a few decades was so hard. I really don't want to do that again. Some of you are like, good luck, it's going to happen. No move is ever great. No one ever comes out of a move saying, ooh, that was easy. But I'm just doing what I can to bring that down a couple notches this time around if I can. And more than likely, wherever we live next, we won't want or need the same amount of stuff. Older and wiser or something. So I want to help future us in that way. If you've gone through something like that, please feel free to share your experience. We can commiserate. So that's a life thing I wanted to share with you. We're using online resources where we can. We Google places and look at aerial maps of neighborhoods. We've looked at Zillow as a way to just see what home prices are like. If you've ever used the Zillow.com or a similar website that shows you homes that are for sale, it's at least a framework for the cost of living in certain places. We made a spreadsheet. Pretty proud of that. We made a spreadsheet listing out, here's our top 5 criteria of places, top 5 criteria of what we want in the next place that we live. And then we lined up some states. If it feels like I'm being vague about that, it's not intentional. It's just that this process is so in flux. Like I might tell you today that our top 5 states where we want to live is this, and this, and 2 months from now it could be different. So it's not really what matters. I'm just proud of us for being organized in our research. And that's helping a lot. That makes it feel real and closer. And it's also been a nice little bonding experience for Drew and I to hear from each other, like what's important at this stage in life for what you want out of your day-to-day and your surroundings. That's been nice too. So that is the update from here. I wish you all a very, very good week ahead. I thank you so much for spending the time with me that you do. It means a lot that I have this way of processing some of what's going on in my headspace, in my making space. So thank you for that. And I will see you again next time.